Well, hey, everybody. Congratulations on becoming the BEF. And if you're not already signed up, make sure you do. Today, I had the pleasure of having Mark Thompson, a good friend of mine, and an amazing author and brilliant business person, come chat with us. And you know that he's coming to South Carolina with us in February. So let's get to this point. Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Brad, how are you doing, man? You're my hero. You're wonderfully watching the way you're mentoring people and helping them make their businesses epic. So I'm glad to be with you.
It's fun because I help them make their business epic. You work with existing epic businesses, like some of the businesses you're coaching are phenomenal.
There's a distance between epic and unicorn. That's what we're here to talk about.
You know, so I want to go back a little ways there, Mark, because you and I met through our good friend Marshall and Marshall Goldsmith. And make sure you read his books as well, gang. We met through Marshall, and one of the things when Marshall first introduced me, he said, you got to meet this guy. He set up all these entrepreneur centers with Richard Branson and stuff like that. And I want to go back to that story because that's kind of a fun thing, setting that up, that with Richard, because I know that Mark's a legend. You guys don't know this yet, and I'm going to get him to tell a bit of his story because I love the story. Buddy, I'm putting you on the spot, I know. But tell us a little about that stuff.
I love it. I mean, I love being on this spot, and I love doing the work with the entrepreneurs because all the people watching this program, you're all trying to do something transformational, trying to build something and make a dream come true. And there's kind of no more iconic person to represent all that than someone like Richard Branson, for heaven's sake. So Richard, with his edgy Sex Pistols and his rethinking of brands, what he does is he brings a customer focus at a whole new level in every company that he touches. And think of this, he has 400 companies under the Virgin brand. Can you imagine? 400 companies.
I always wonder about that.
To mobile phones, to athletic firms, he has airlines. So he's all over the map, but the unifying thread is something that is so brilliantly taught by what Brad and his team do, and that is really this focus on understanding the customer. So we got involved in helping try to pull together Branson in a box. How could you take this Virgin sort of vibe and think about the ways you could bring people in and give them training in parts of the world where you might be afraid to walk down the street. I mean, it's amazing to think about these Branson entrepreneurship centers being in places where people are unlocking their dreams, sometimes under cover of darkness or in dangerous places. And if there's anything that really takes courage, it's being an entrepreneur, that's for sure. I'm sure most of the people watching this program and who will be participating have felt hunted at some point, felt that you were under pressure. And so what we like to do is find ways to give people support, give them the tools of the trade, learn what business A to Z is, think about ways to build a brand. What does it really take to do customer service? All the blocking and tackling. And Richard is he's a rich-spirited guy, a big heart. He's a grandpa now, and hanging out with him on Necker Island, which is an awfully nice place in the British Virgin Islands. You could do worse, or you could actually trade up and hang out with Brad Sugars in Australia or in Indonesia.
I remember because when I was in Dublin early this year as one of the opening acts for Sir Richard, it was like before me was Lady Michelle Mone, and Michelle's become a good friend of mine now, the member of the House of Lords. And then there's me, this convict from Australia, and then there's Sir Richard Branson. It was like, that was one of the funniest lineups I've ever seen of speakers. Now, when it comes to business, buddy, taking businesses and making them massive is something that is your thing. But right now, because you guys don't know this, but Mark is just a genius in Silicon Valley, right? Buddy, that's your place. That's your thing. Because Stanford, the Entrepreneur Center there, the whole thing. Tell us about Silicon Valley, because I think that what you do there is phenomenal.
Well, it's amazing. The thing is about Silicon Valley is that folks sometimes think of California, I think we're kind of laid back, but it just means that we actually never take a shower. We're just working 25 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have people here who want to reinvent things, make them better. And we have basically 170 years, ever since the gold rush in 1849, they've been training entrepreneurship here. People have speculated, but people have also built great businesses. The guys who supplied the trains, the guys who supplied the jeans, Levi Strauss and others, these are the people that built Silicon Valley, and that they took their money and they invested in Stanford University and Berkeley to build a country at the time, California. And so they were in this massive race to train people to be entrepreneurs, to create jobs, to create new businesses, to create infrastructure, and to do that differently than the rest of the U.S. or the world. And so what's always amazing to me is this, when you look at the amount of venture capital, the $60 billion a year that's invested, $60 billion a year invested here, and that's half of what really gets invested all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's because there's this really return to how can we recreate businesses to make them better? How can we always take that risk to provide a better value proposition for customers?
For you as a venture capitalist, and obviously, you know, Mark's history, by the way, ran the Schwab family's personal money. Now it's his money that he invests in all these companies. You know, you don't just, as an investor, you don't just invest. You come in and coach these companies. And we could list off the companies that Mark coaches and owns shares of, and they're all the tech companies that are geniuses of. But, buddy, when you go in and coach these, I mean, they're from startups, but they're startups with like $1 billion in the bank, gang. It's a bit different to normal startups. When you're coaching these startups that are in high growth mode, what are some of the things that you've really got to consider for them? Because high growth mode is different to slow growth. Business has to think entirely differently in that frame.
Right. I mean, most of these models that they're building have been in a growth mode where they're acquiring customers. You take something like Pinterest, which is a huge social platform, 200 million monthly active users.
And Mark is their coach, by the way. Mark is their coach, so don't, you know, he just coaches a few little companies out there.
Yeah, they didn't start out that way. I mean, just 3 years ago, they had, let's say 4 years ago, they had 5 million in revenues. Then it was 25 million. This year, they'll do $1 billion in revenues. So you're talking about a growth trajectory over 5 years, which is epic. The same sort of growth happening at Lyft, where I've been spending a lot of time in San Francisco, and a whole horde of other companies. And I'd say the main principle always ends up coming down to hiring your weakness, finding those people that have skills that you don't. And one of the toughest things, I think, for entrepreneurs is, this is your baby. This is something that you've wanted to build. This is a dream that you've had. And it's about being engaged, but also getting the hell out of the way, getting other people who are expert at the various functions throughout the business who can do things hopefully better than you can. Yeah. This is really often a very big stumbling point. I'd say that's probably the biggest difference between those who really become unicorns are ones who really look around the table and say, that guy, that person, that gal, that individual from around the world, these people can contribute better in what they do than I do. And they work really hard to find those people, inspire them, bring them to the task. And I mean, people like Charles Schwab himself was so dyslexic that he really couldn't write a letter. Yeah. And yet he's brilliant in finance, incredible coming up with new financial products, great at marketing. But when it came to really getting through college, he was kicked out of Stanford twice. So the first thing he did, of course, is get communications people, get people who could write and do all the things that he couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I got to know him. So I think that's one of the big hurdles I think people need to climb.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I go back, and because one of the things we're going to be doing is really going into how to grow a business. And that's something that, for you, that's not like just incremental growth. That's magnificent growth. And you use the term unicorn for a company that gets to that phase. And I think a lot of business people, I guess I won't say they're scared of that level of growth, but they're scared of that level of growth. How do people get past that, Mark? Because I think that's something that you've taught a lot of people and coached them through, getting past that fear of that level of growth. Because you're kind of out of control a little bit when you get to that level of growth.
Well, probably the best businesses are those that can be handed off to a team of people at that point, where you really have acquired the talent and acquired the systems and processes, so that honestly, that's how a business does go public and get finances, when they know that it's not just that individual anymore that they're taking a bet of billions on. They're betting on a whole system, a whole approach, a whole set of customer lists, distribution, all of the functionality of that. But in terms of kind of getting out of our own drama about growth, it's an important and valuable lesson, I think, to realize that the reason you got involved in this business is because you care about a customer, you care about solving a problem, and not worry so much at first about the growth trajectory, but really double down on understanding what is it that you're differentiating in the marketplace? What are you providing that's special? What's that's value proposition that making the offering that you have somehow unique or better or special or maybe more economic, whatever the values are that are really present in that customer market?
Yeah.
I think you can, that never goes out of style. Whether you're generating your first $10,000 or whether you're generating your first 10 billion, it seems that we lose that narrative often. We say, we lose this plot line that made us successful in the first place, and it always comes back to the person who's betting their hard-earned money on you for your services. And I think if you focus on that a little less than your own drama, it gives you a sense of purpose. This isn't just about me. This is about us serving a market. This is about making it better for customers. This is about having impact that's bigger than you or I in the long term.
And that's one of the biggest challenges I see, especially for small to medium-sized companies where they go from owner-operator to, I wouldn't say corporate at that stage, but they go from small to mid-sized companies where the owner is still important, but, and I use the terminology of let go. The owner's got to let go at some point.
Right.
But I want to touch on something that, you and I have chatted about this, Marshall and you and I have chatted about this. Coaching as an industry has shifted as well. Yeah. It used to be like, okay, this guy's failing, we'll get him a coach as a last resort and hopefully he'll succeed. So now it's like companies that are real winners are bringing on coaching. How did that transformation happen in coaching? I just want to get your perspective on that, because a lot of the people coming obviously have coaches, and I want them to understand that this is the way of the future. I guess that it's a hard thing for people to understand if they don't really see the industry from the outside as well as the inside.
Well, I mean, when you think about the vulnerable state that you're in when you've got a coaching arrangement, you're having to say, warts and all, this is who I am, this is what I need to work on, and it's worth noticing what those things are so I can get better, stronger, faster, have higher impact, hire people better, keep better people, recruit better people. And that all comes down to you as a leader being willing to open your heart up and your soul, warts and all, to do that. Now, the reality is, if you look at any professional sports or athlete or performer in fields of music and talent, nobody would dare try to go to the Olympics or the World Cup without not just one coach, but a few mission specialists to get you on base. And this is what I feel has really been a turning point. I think this next set of younger people have come to the project and said, hey, well, why don't I have a coach for doing marketing? Why don't I get help in understanding how to set up operations and inventory and distribution? Aren't these skill sets? Aren't there people who know how to do this? Do I actually have to make all of the mistakes myself every time? Or is there a way to kind of scale that? And I'd say that it's been also a generational shift where people are accustomed to getting support and getting help. And of course, the more support and help, the faster you grow. And you can kind of skip over and leapfrog all of those disappointments and troubles that a lot of others have already been through. So not only one coach, but sometimes many coaches make a huge bit of difference.
Yeah, I see it happen all the time. Now, you're coaching these massive companies as well. I mean, but the thing is, they're still individuals, and this is what I try and get through to all business owners. It doesn't matter if you're running the biggest segment of Google and you got Mark as your coach, or you're CEO of this massive business and, Smule and all of these other companies. And it doesn't matter. It's you as a person have to grow. And I've often said, Mark, if you don't grow, then the business can't grow. How do you explain that philosophy to your coachees or your clients that you work with or the companies you invest in?
Well, when you think about it, you can't really scale a business, as they say, any faster than you scale yourself. It's hard to transform a business any faster than you actually transform yourself. You end up having to look in the mirror every morning and saying, how am I going to go from kind of average to good to great at this? And of course, to the extent that you're successful, that's the good news is the stakes get greater. The level of gameplay has to get better to match the level of challenge and the opportunities that you have. So I'd say that what really recruits people to try to get better every day is all of a sudden the opportunities becoming enormous. And you're probably, as you go about this, there isn't probably a person here who didn't find out a way to make it even better than you did it last year. And so also having this sense of creative self-renewal or creative self-destruction. Andy Grove built a little company to the biggest chip company in the world, Intel. And he wrote a great book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And so a little bit of that fear that you're talking about can be converted into maybe just kind of the whack that you need to say, no, let's get better at this today.
Yeah.
Or let's get a better person to do this today. Or maybe let's not do it the same way we did it yesterday. Let's find a better route now rather than just paving that cow path. That ends up being, I think, a big challenge for small and big companies is once you're successful, sometimes the success isn't a good teacher. You end up wanting to just follow the right way, right? For me, when I talk to people who you think are ethically successful, they talk about failure so much you think they were losers.
Yeah.
Because they're just always harvesting that next learn. It's about what I learned today and can apply tomorrow so that I can make tomorrow better than today rather than, of course, wallowing in the past. But they find that, the best tuition, I paid for it. I paid for the mistake. Let's make new mistakes now. Let's not make old ones. So that sort of sense of self-renewal, I think, ends up being really key in the journey.
Yeah. Look, I see, and I watch over the years, and from your best-selling book, and this is something, if you haven't read Mark's book, make sure you pick up. I mean, I got to go back to some of the lessons in there because, good to great was an interesting philosophy of, these are the actual things. And they wrote a great book and did some things. You took that to a whole other level. And you guys did a bunch of research and all of that stuff, which, by the way, Mark, genius research. College guys, genius that. Me, not good research. Really good at day-to-day practical stuff, all right? But when you did all of that research and you came up, and he's going to teach you a lot of this stuff when we all get together, by the way. When you did all that research, there must have been some stories in there where you just went, how are these guys still here? How are they surviving? And how are they amazingly successful? Because some people just buck the trend and yet they're still super successful and stuff. I'd love you to think of what was one of the best stories from that book and your research within that.
Well, I think that we were talking about Richard Branson earlier, and if you have 400 companies, you obviously don't have 400 successes. You have some really remarkable failures. And one of his biggest learnings about being an entrepreneur was this concept we were talking about where you tend to want to do same things, say over and over again, rather than looking for the next best thing, the next best value equation, the next best way to distance yourself from your competitors so that you're moving faster in the marketplace. And I do love the story where Kate Winslet and family was in the house and his 90-year-old mom was in the home on Necker Island. This is the place where he raised his kids, where he raised volume after volume of notes that he constantly takes learning from people. So he must have had 300 notebooks lined up in there. And one night in a horrible storm, in a hurricane like this season, the house just burst into flames. And he was sleeping on the beach because the house was already filled with people. And the problem was he wasn't fully clothed. So he went to run into the rescue. He realized he was half naked and ran into a cactus, which is not very pleasant when you don't have the right equipment covering you. And he was fortunately seeing everybody escape the place, escape the turmoil, and nobody was hurt. But he had this real epiphany about renewal. He said, what if all of us forget about the college degree, let's forget about the fancy consulting firm right now. Just think about it. If today your house burned down, would you rebuild the house the same way? Would it have all the same architecture? Would it have all the same ingredients? Would you, if your business burned down, would you have all the same products and processes? How would you rethink the way you do business in a way that would reflect the fact that you could just start from scratch?
Yeah.
And the good news is your house hasn't burned down, you haven't lost your business, and you're still wondering how to innovate.
Yeah.
And if you could just burn it down, that ends up being, I think, from one really instructive journey that he took, that was kind of adding up all of his other experiences as an entrepreneur. He says, just put it down, start over. What would you do?
Yeah, I remember reading that segment and thinking to myself, when you sit there, it's like you've almost got to try and put your old business out of business.
Yes,
if you really want to innovate, it's like, how do I put my old business and make it obsolete with my new business type thing? And that means all your old competitors are also obsolete at that point in time.
Right.
That's what
disrupt yourself. That's
yeah.
right.
And so I love watching that. And when it comes to, you mentioned the word disruption. Dang, the companies you're coaching, that's basically what they're doing every single day, is disrupting not just, I won't even just say companies or industries, they're disrupting the way humans live.
Right.
And that level of thinking is something that I love, the way you coach that in people and get that level of thinking out. Give us a couple of tips just here today. Like, we're not going to get all of his secrets, obviously, but let's get a couple of tips, Marco. How do you get into a disruptive thinker mentality?
Right. Well, I think the key really is to start to look about the marketplace and look for what there are in terms of adjacent business opportunities. And we're going to take a deep dive on this when I get together, because I think almost every business you have has an opportunity to double its revenues if you were to think about all of the adjacent businesses that might come out of it. And once you have a core competency in this automotive business that you have, or this repair shop, or when you're reinventing the way a restaurant works, there ends up being these incredible product extensions that people haven't imagined before. Think about Uber Eats. It started out as a self-driving car company. There are the opportunities to think about all the things that might be able to be delivered through that same value equation, through that same process. We're going to talk about a lot of those where you can take what you build in terms of an organization or a business and think about how you can get these product extensions, product adjacencies, add on new capabilities. That to me gets me very excited to think that the core business that you've already built not only deserves to grow in the way that it's always been growing, but also grow because there might be adjacent areas that you can invest in,
Yeah. I know for me, that's something that is basically all I've been doing for the last 10 years is finding...
Yeah, you're all over the place, man.
It's funny because, like, you always mention Branson with 400 companies, and I'm sitting here with 16, and people look at me like, are you crazy? 16 companies? How do you do that? And it's like, the funny thing is, the more successful you get, the less you do of day-to-day work and the more you do of the real thinking work, because that's where the real money is. Buddy, I cannot wait to hang out with you in Charleston, South Carolina's a beautiful spot. We'll have to get some nice dinners down there, of course. But for those of you who are coming, look forward to seeing Mark, of course. For those of you who are not there yet, sign up today. Make sure you get there. And even more important, and Mark even actually mentions this in his book, you got to bring your executives there as well, because you got to bring the other people that are the up-and-comers in your company to invest in them so they start running it the following year. Buddy, any last little hints for everybody today? I know you're always reading new stuff. What's the latest thing that you've seen that you thought, gee, that's a good idea?
Well, I think probably the best idea is to eat your own cooking, and to experience your own complete customer experience. It's amazing how many times small and big companies don't have the opportunity to have the humility to experience it from scratch. So maybe mystery shop your own business. Take a look from the perspective of the customer with fresh eyes. That is, it's frightening how much renewal you can get when you actually shop for yourself with yourself. And so that ends up being a kind of a big breakthrough for companies big and small. And Brad, I can't wait to be there with all your colleagues and everyone who comes to this conference. It's going to be an epic event, and I want to make sure that I'm available to everyone so we can have a conversation and continue the dialogue, because a lot of what I learned comes from you, man. So
thank you, buddy. Hey, great to have you here. Gang, look forward to chatting to you again soon. Bye from Mark. Bye from me. Have a great day.
Cheers.